At the annual party rally held in Nuremberg in 1935, the Nazis announced new laws that institutionalized many of the racial theories prevalent in Nazi ideology. These laws were known as the Nuremberg Laws. German Jews were stripped from their Reich citizenship and were not allowed to have sexual relations or marry with persons of German or related blood. Jews were also deprived of political rights.
The Nuremberg Laws, as they became known, did not define a Jew as someone with particular religious beliefs. Instead, anyone who had 3 or 4 Jewish grandparents was defined as a Jew, regardless of whether that individual identified himself or herself as a Jew or belonged to the Jewish religious community. This meant that the German Jews were later unable to escape deportation by converting to Christianity.
The Nuremberg Laws were created by Adolf Hitler. Hitler wrote these laws hastily because he felt that Jews should not have the right to German citizenship. On September 13, 1935, Hitler called on a desk official for racial laws, and they sat down to formulate the legal language of the laws. Hitler wanted to present these laws at the Nuremberg rally on September 15th, which left him only 2 days to write the laws. He succeeded in writing the unfair and prejudiced laws.
The most important consequence of the Nuremberg Laws was the realization of the distinction between a Jew and an Aryan. This distinction became vital later on when the Nazis began the deportation and extermination of the Jews. The second important consequence of the Nuremberg Laws was the new rule of the state. The state now had the right to discriminate not only the Jews but the Gypsies as well.
10 years later, it would also be in Nuremberg, now nearly destroyed by a British and American heavy bombing, where surviving prominent Nazi leaders were put on trial for war crimes and crimes against humanity. The war in Europe ended in May 1945, and soon the attention of the Allies turned to prosecuting those Third Reich leaders who had been responsible for, among other things, the persecution of the Jews in the Holocaust. The trials began on November 20, 1945, in Nuremberg's Palace of Justice, which had somehow survived the intense Allied bombing. In 1944 and 1945,
the next day, U.S. Supreme Court Justice Robert H. Jackson, named by President Harry S. Truman as the U.S. Chief Counsel for the Prosecution of Axis Criminality, made his opening statement to the International Military Tribunal. The most serious actions against Jews were outside of any law, but the law itself was employed to some extent. They were the infamous Nuremberg Decrees of September 15, 1935. Jackson said the so-called Nuremberg Laws, a crucial step in Nazi racial laws that led to the marginalization of German Jews and ultimately to their segregation, confinement, and extermination, were key pieces of evidence in the trials, which resulted in 12 death sentences and life or long sentences for other Third Reich leaders.